Mr. Kimball, are you surprised in any way by the apparent restrained reactions coming from President Trump upon learning the news of the missile test from DPRK?
Well, I'm not surprised that President Trump, who was with Prime Minister Abe, was brief in his remarks. He had just learned about the ballistic missile test launch. President Trump and his team, I think, are still formulating their approach to North Korea. We know very little about how they might adjust U.S. policy. Rex Tillerson, in his confirmation hearings before the Senate a couple of weeks ago, did acknowledge that a new approach would be necessary to slow and eventually reverse North Korea's nuclear and missile progress.
Right.
So I think they're still formulating their policy. I think his remarks were brief in part for that reason.
Okay, if I could just follow up upon that, Mr. Kimball. During the weekend, in various talk shows, Mr. Stephen Miller, who is an advisor on policy for the White House, said this. He said, standing together, President Trump, together with Prime Minister Abe, when Prime Minister Abe is suggesting that the test of DPRK is absolutely intolerable, that is already one strong signal that President Trump sent. The other strong signal, according to him, is we are going to rebuild the strongest armed forces of the United States, and that is going to come soon, end of quote. That's coming from Mr. Miller, advisor for the White House on policies. What exactly does he mean? Can you read anything specific as a Washingtonian about this?
Well, I think he was trying to put a good spin on President Trump's response, which was rhetorical. It was brief. He was literally standing next to Prime Minister Abe at that moment. But what he said, what Miller said about rebuilding the U.S. military strength, this is a common refrain from the Trump administration. It's not specific to North Korea or East Asia. Trump has frequently complained, I think incorrectly, that U.S. military forces are not properly prepared. So we're hearing once again some campaign rhetoric from the Trump team about reinvesting or spending more on U.S. military preparedness.
I see. Then, if it is campaign rhetoric, mainly still coming from the Trump administration, what about from the Chinese government? Mr. Yang, sitting here with me in Beijing. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said several things. Yep. Restraint, as always, for peace and stability of Korean Peninsula. Secondly, against any action from DPRK beyond what the Security Council of United Nations allows it to do. Thirdly, participating UN Security Council discussion about the latest DPRK movement with constructive and also responsible attitude. Are these also usual rhetorics, or are you reading any special signals out of this?
Well, that is the long-time position. Whenever China and the international community face a provocative situation made by North Korea's launches, either by satellite, missiles, even nuclear tests,
right.
All of them are banned by the UNSC related resolutions. So this time, what you introduced or quoted just repeat the previous positions. However, after the statement, after the discussions at UNSC, I think China will join in the joint actions if UNSC decide, and also bilaterally, China will increase our efforts to restrain North Korea from going further. But meanwhile, for all the parties, China always say self-restraint for every party.
Okay. Ms. Lim, coming from South Korea, let me ask you also a specific question. South Korea, the closest neighbor of DPRK, there were also suggestions earlier about not a military attack of the United States against the DPRK because ally, such as South Korea, strongly against it. At this point, South Korea worked with the US on that. Is there going to be also other changes of attitude of Seoul in terms of how to deal with possible crisis to come?
Okay, yeah, thank you for that question. In my own opinion, I don't think that is actually adding another how you said, the variable to cause further provocation, because that is basically a defensive system rather than an offensive system against the North Korea. Again, we are trying to add one more layer to detect more accurately whatever those North Korea's missile launch, especially for the mid or the long-range missile launches. So I don't think a THAAD per se is the problem to cause all these provocations from North. Again, they already set up their own direction, and they might use THAAD as their kind of rhetoric. But again, I don't think THAAD is the cause for all of this. So of course, if you think about all this political turmoil these days, I mean, in South Korea, probably we might have an earlier election that it was scheduled. So THAAD can be another issue for the domestic discussions as well. But again, in my own view, I don't think it's the problem to cause all the things.
Okay. If every one of you have already expressed your understanding of your own country's stance, let me ask a common question, which is, what is your understanding from an expert's perspective of where DPRK is in terms of developing a nuclear weapon? DPRK earlier have said it's not their goal, but then of course later their actions prove the other way around. At this point, Ms. Lim, coming from South Korea, what do you make of it? This time, it's only intermediate missile. Intermediate range missile, it's really not that big a deal in terms of comparing to their previous tests. Some even say it's just a hello coming from Pyongyang to Washington for the new administration. But what is your expertise of judgment where DPRK is in terms of capabilities?
Yeah, of course, I'm not a nuclear physicist or I'm not the technology specialist, but as far as I heard from my colleagues who do have more knowledge about all this technology, it is pretty clear that they have certainly developed the capability. So in terms of, for example, the nuclear, it looks like they already accomplished the miniaturization capability, and also in terms of the delivery system too, they have certainly developed the capability. So probably the last missing puzzle they really want to complete is again the ICBM capability, as they addressed already. Kim Jong-un, he already addressed that. I mean, when he was delivering his New Year's remark. So that might be the one last missing puzzle we can expect. Of course, I'm not saying that I want to see that kind of things, but they might be pretty likely to see whatever those similar capability tests they're going to show this year. So that is why I think we really.
You were quoting
yes,
of Mr. Kim for his New Year's speech. There's another quote, Mr. Kimball, coming from the highest profile defector coming from DPRK. Of course, how much you can trust defectors' rhetorics is another issue. But Mr. Tae Yong-ho, former deputy ambassador to London, he was suggesting to the Western media about a possibility to control a functioning nuclear arsenal by the end of this year. That's what he told the media about what DPRK wants to do. Once again, it's questionable because he gets defector, but exactly what is your judgment?
Well, I think that assessment is plausible. I mean, what North Korea has been doing over the last 2 or 3 years is they have accelerated their ballistic missile testing and their nuclear testing. They are very close. I don't think they're quite there of having a fully operational nuclear weapons delivery capability. What we just saw with this medium-range ballistic missile test, this is probably the KN-11 missile. This is the same type of missile that was tested from a submarine unsuccessfully last year. This time launched from land. What's very significant about this test is that it has a solid fuel rocket motor.
Meaning?
And it's being launched from a road mobile vehicle. That means that North Korea is seeking a medium-range nuclear weapons delivery system on a road mobile system. That makes it very difficult for the United States or South Korea to detect where that system is, to interdict it before it can launch. So North Korea has not started ICBM tests. That could happen later this year. So what we have to remember is that with every single ballistic missile test, North Korea's technicians are learning more. With every single nuclear test, they are learning more about miniaturization and about the re-entry vehicle that has to take that nuclear device back to the Earth from the ballistic missile. So we need to, it's in every country's interest to halt further ballistic missile testing and nuclear testing as soon as possible. And in my view, that requires dialogue, and dialogue very soon.
Mr. Yang, your American counterpart has his judgment. What about you? Intercontinental ballistic missiles, of course, is the big stuff over there. How soon? What can countries do in a way to restrain that from further happening?
Well, let me put it by this way. 3 points. Number one, in terms of the miniaturization of the nuclear head, they have been successful. They have got a relatively mature technology to make small enough nuclear warhead so that they can sit the vehicle.
Right.
And number two, regarding to the technology to combine the warhead into the vehicle, there remain a long way to go. They need to have more tests. And number three, ballistic missile technology compared with the nuclear warhead technology, the development has far behind the nuclear warhead progresses. So I'm afraid they will have more missile tests. For example, last year they have 8 tests for Musudan. Only 1 of the 8 was successful.
Yeah.
That means that technology is quite far from mature. And this time, even we say, okay, this time is successful, that not can guarantee the technology mature.
This is the
so
very first one of the year.
Intermediate range missile remain under development. But for ICBM, I'm afraid they can do that before end of this year, but I'm afraid a longer way to go to have a reliable ICBM.
But certainly there is an issue of development that we have seen from that front over there. And therefore people are asking, what is likely to be the tangle between DPRK and the current administration inside Washington? Mr. Kimball, as you may remember even clearer than I do, how previous U.S. presidents have dealt with the DPRK's nuclear and missile tests. The Clinton administration reached an agreement with the DPRK in 1994 when Pyongyang agreed to shut down nuclear plants that could produce materials for weapons. On the other hand, diplomatic tensions with the DPRK marked the Bush presidency despite 6-party talks as the DPRK restarted nuclear plants and missile tests. Under the Obama administration, no assistance was offered to DPRK at all, of course, and also unprecedented sanctions were imposed on the DPRK, and we all remember that phrase, Mr. Kimball, strategic patience, meaning doing nothing, only sanctions. What about this White House? This is amateur that we are seeing in foreign policy right now, but it doesn't mean they wouldn't come up with a sound plan for the future. What is likely, do you think, on his agenda? And how is he, President Trump, likely to use the allies in the region, Japan, over the weekend, as we have seen? Obviously, he wants everybody to see it. And also South Korea in that regard. Mr. Kimball.
Well, first of all, I think every new American administration has an opportunity to adjust policy to make it more effective regarding North Korea. Likewise, North Korea apparently has exercised a bit of restraint since September up until this point. No ballistic missile tests or nuclear tests. They're probably also watching and waiting to see what the new Trump administration has to offer. Is it anything different from the Obama administration? As I said, I think the Trump administration recognizes that the Obama administration's approach was not successful. That wasn't just because the United States failed. The North Koreans did not cooperate. They were engaged in these provocations. But I think there is an opportunity, if President Trump will want to seek it, to signal to the North that he is interested in opening up talks for talks. Let's sit down, let's discuss what we might be able to discuss with respect to security issues, denuclearization, possibly efforts towards the negotiation of a lasting peace treaty. He would have to consult with the United States allies in Tokyo and Seoul and Beijing about this approach, because their support would be essential. So I think that is the approach I would recommend. Whether this administration does that or not, I do not know. What will be critical is the exercises that are about to take place between the United States and South Korea, the military exercises. Will North Korea react to those negatively? And will that create an action-reaction cycle on both sides that makes it difficult to begin useful talks?
Some are already suggesting this might be just a prelude to quote-unquote welcome those military exercises between Seoul and Washington. We'll see how it's likely to be the next chapter. Ms. Lim, what about your judgment? South Korea, at this point, compared to the U.S. ally Japan, of course, is experiencing a very different period of political time. What do you think is so likely to embrace in terms of solution, if there is one anyway?
I think for the last couple of decades, South Korean people have tried many different efforts to denuclearize North Korea and to build more peace, in the peninsula. We practice sometimes more hawkish approach, or we practice a so-called sunshine policy, very friendly policy to them too. But neither of those, none of these policies actually has accomplished the original goal, again, the denuclearization of North Korea. My point is, now South Korean people got too much, I think, frustrations about our precedented approaches, and that they do know we have to practice another approach, which might not be that clear as of now. But as of now, I can't tell you. We got some huge frustrations about the former approaches, including the sunshine policy.
Okay, Mr. Yang, final words from you. We got limited time, 30 seconds if you can, sir. All options are on the table? Well, Mr. Trump always wants to say all options are on the table.
Yeah, that's
Is China prepared for all options on the table, whether from DPRK or from the United States?
No, China is all options on the table except military one. This is a red line for China, and for that position, China hope to have a comprehensive discussion, to have a comprehensive architecture to solve this issue in a comprehensive way rather than the individual way.
It's interesting, all the Northeast Asian nations have all made their appearance over the past few days in terms of their relations with the United States.